Hey everyone, welcome to our webinar today. We'll give a minute for more people to join, but very quickly, the topic we have for the day is a very important one: accelerating time to value, creating paths to long term client success. And I think if you're in implementation, onboarding, professional services, all of us know really, really well that launching our customers on time, getting them to value quickly, both of these are very important things that all of us are dealing with in the world of SaaS implementations and PS. Uh, we look at it as super important because people are very wary of software that they buy turning into shelfware today, right? And they want to ensure that they are going to get value. This leads to many uncomfortable conversations when you don't get the customer to value quickly, don't get them launched on time, because it means the customer is like, hey, it's been a few months since I bought this software, I'm not yet getting value, can you give me more credits? Or if we want to disengage, we want to churn from here at the first opportunity that they get, right? So it's super important topic. Appropriately, I think this has been one of our most registered events as well as an independent webinar outside of Propel, of course. So, quick housekeeping. We're going to take questions through the Q&A pod. You can see on the right side where it says engagement. Under that, you have Q&A. Please ask your questions there. If you just post it on chat, we will take it and post it in Q&A and answer them. But easier for us if you post it under Q&A itself. We will be sending the recording, so don't worry about it if you miss a part in between. And if you want a demo of Rocketlane, you can always use the talk to us at the top right to reach out to us and you know uh, come get a demo of Rocketlane. I'm your host for today, and I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Rocketlane. We are the number one modern customer-centric client onboarding and PSA platform. Super excited about today's topic. I personally have learned a lot in the last 4 years, just about tips and tricks around getting customers launched faster, getting them to value faster, and I really look forward to learning from Greg Daines today, right? And adding to my ever-growing list. If any of you are interested in my list, I do maintain like a document with all the tactics that I've learned about launching customers faster. I'm happy to share that with you. Just reach out to sri@rocketlane.com. Always happy to do that. Share my personal notes on the topic as well. And then quickly about Rocketlane. We are a purpose-built client project delivery platform. We're really built for implementation and onboarding and PS teams. We help you accelerate time to value, help you productize how you do your delivery, bring that consistency into the experience, create transparency with the customer through a beautiful branded customer portal. We've recently given that a huge uplift. So if you want to look at what's latest new with our embeddable customer portal 2.0, again, register for a demo with us. And we also help you run a profitable function in your PS or implementation team, and help you with improving the utilization rates on your team. Now on to the hero for the day. We're going to have Greg Daines talk us through a lot of learnings on this topic of accelerating time to value. And Greg is the founder and CEO of ChurnRX, and they're a consulting firm that's partnered with many organizations, helping them with reducing churn, improving customer engagement, and of course, time to value is one of the key topics that Greg deals with as well with his clients. I'm going to turn it over to Greg now to take us through the rest of the presentation.
All right, fantastic. Thank you for that intro, Sri. And I will add, because it's relevant to what I'm going to talk about, that I was originally a CEO founder, SaaS multiple times, B2B, and in areas where frequently implementations were very complex. And this topic became important to me very quickly because I could see how much was riding on how well that early engagement with the customer would go. So I have a lot to say. I've made a lot of mistakes and learned a lot of things about this. So I'll share with you what I have. Mostly I want to get to, here's what I found were the fastest, most effective ways I could reduce the amount of time and friction that implementation takes. So I'll be happy to share that with you. But in order to do that, I actually want to start by sharing some research. So this is kind of interesting. The essence of my advice actually all derives from a new view of customer success that we found largely by studying customers more effectively. And it came out of the fact that I discovered really surprisingly early on that a lot of what we think and say about customer success in general doesn't really apply in the real world. And the classic example is when you have, the customer satisfaction factor turn out to be a little bit confusing. Here's what I mean. So have you ever had a customer leave, but on the way out tell you what a great experience it was working with your company? Right? This happens all the time. And I used to think, what? If you had a great experience, if you're satisfied, why are you leaving? Or you've had maybe the opposite experience where you have an unhappy customer that just keeps renewing. Again, there's something going on here. And I realized that we didn't actually have as much data-driven evidence as I wanted around, well, what is really at the heart of why customers stay? And so we did a bunch of research. I'm just going to share quickly a couple things because they're relevant to this question. They help us frame what types of things should we be focused on when we're reducing time to value, time to implement. So I like this question. I think this question, why do customers stay, is the most important question in business. And one of the reasons is that we all have this basic theory, I would call it. Everyone just knows customers who are happy stay and unhappy customers leave. But my experience and yours probably contradicts that way too often for that to be universally true. So here's a piece of data that we've published at ChurnRX. We do a lot of churn analyses. We have a huge customer retention database, lots of detail. We can do really good research. I'll show you a few things. This is the first one, which is many companies, almost every company you can think of, has invested massively in improving their customer experience to drive up customer satisfaction levels. And over the last several years, our data shows that has paid off. Customer satisfaction has been steadily going up and pretty significantly. We kind of have figured out how to make better customer experiences, right? It's not cheap, it's not easy, but we kind of figured it out. But here's the crazy thing. Over that same period of time, customer retention has gone down at twice the rate. So we're improving satisfaction overall, but we're seeing customer churn getting worse and worse. What's going on? Well, the next thing I would say is we've done a bunch of research to test that original hypothesis. This question I had, what do happy customers really stay longer? And a cool thing, over the last several years, every company in the world, basically almost everybody, has decided to use the same satisfaction scale, the NPS, Net Promoter Score. And so we have this huge amount of data now across many companies. All our data is SaaS B2B, just to be clear, but it cuts across that whole world. And over 2 million records in our database. And so we're looking at this over and over again. We refresh this study every year. And the question is, what's the relationship? And what you'd expect is something like this, right? Where a low satisfaction level would have a low customer lifespan, and a high satisfaction level would be a longer lifespan, right? Just makes sense. But this is what the data actually shows. It turns out there's literally no correlation at all, zero, between how satisfied customers say they are and how long they stay. Well, this is very consistent. We've found this result every time we've tested this across companies, inside companies, but we've also found it when we use other scales. Other satisfaction scales produce the same result. Over and over again, one of the most consistent findings we've ever had is just how uncorrelated customer satisfaction is with customer lifespan. So this is important finding number one. This is a big framing thing, which is implementation. You have a lot of work to do, right? Everything's about getting this customer to success. One thing you should be absolutely clear on is that the experience the customer has will not determine how long they stay. Now, that doesn't mean we don't want to make customers happy. Don't misunderstand me. Of course, we need to make them happy, and shame on us if we don't. It just won't matter in terms of their long-term success. So the number one priority is something other than making them satisfied. Well, this makes a lot of sense in implementation because you tend to be doing, depending on how complex it is, things the customer doesn't really want to do. And so we're always feeling a little bit hesitant. How much do I push customers and get them outside their comfort zone and potentially even annoy them? And what's the consequence of that? Well, our data shows consistently that to the degree that that is annoying or causes them trouble, it does not damage long-term customer viability, which is really interesting. So that's big takeaway number one. Well, then what is it? If customers don't stay because they're happy, why do they stay? The answer is by far the most consistent finding we found in our data, by far. The best predictor of customer long-term retention is getting to results, measurable results. Customers who have any level of measurable results on average stay 6 times longer than customers who don't. So it's a really powerful predictor. And as you saw, satisfaction was 0. So it's between 0 times better or 6 times better. And I'll show you just how powerful this really is. In fact, when we break it down, right, because there are customers who get poor results, good results, doesn't matter. It turns out it does matter. So here's what we find. When we look at customers by essentially their average lifespan, the lowest lifespan group is the customers who aren't measuring their results. And this is interesting because these are customers who probably, some of them are getting results. In fact, many of them may be getting results, but they're not measuring them, okay? When we start to measure customer results, we see big impacts. And the first one is going to shock you. It shocked me, but it applies to customers who are getting bad results, okay? So one of the big hesitations people have about showing customers results is, what if they're bad? Well, the answer is it already makes customers stay twice as long if you just start measuring their results, even if they're poor. And for many companies, that's enough to change the game. So we need to understand clearly that measuring results has got to be a fundamental part of everything we do with customers, and that includes implementation. If they're getting what we would call good results, the kind we expect, it doubles again, 4x. If they're getting the best results, it doubles again, 8x. So the lifespan is fundamentally a function of getting customers to results. So that's that finding. And then one more finding. This is really interesting. We found over and over and over again that customers who fail and churn, even if they do so kind of down the road, like 1-2 years later, most of them actually failed very early in the process. It just wasn't picked up. So implementation, nobody on this call needs to be convinced, is the most important, most pivotal moment in the entire customer relationship. There's no other point where our data shows you can have as big of an impact on long term. And this is one study we did. This is a customer, client of ours that had 25,000 records. It's a big study. And basically what we did was we looked at what's the failure rate, the churn rate for customers between those who got started quickly within 10 days and those who didn't get started within 10 days. And you can see the difference is massive. The green line is retention. That's how many customers have stayed in the group that got started quickly. And the blue line is the fall off rate over time of the customers who didn't get started quickly. So it's just really, really big impact. What we know is that getting started quickly and getting to results quickly is the whole game. Okay, so that's my setup for, I'm going to go through 3 areas, in fact, that I essentially have found to radically accelerate time to value. And it's not easy, right? Again, depending on how complex your implementation is and how many dependencies there are, this process can just feel overwhelming. And that was certainly my situation over and over again. But what I found is that there are pockets of opportunities that you can reasonably address fairly quickly. And I want to pull out each of those, but I'm going to put them under 3 headings. So the big opportunities are, first, implement results, not technology. We'll talk about that. Second, minimize customer dependencies. And then third, holding customers accountable. That's the most interesting one of them all. Okay, so let me jump into it. Implementing results, not technology. What do I mean by that? Well, one of the things that I found when I started to look deeply at what we were doing in our implementations is I realized that they were heavily technology driven. We were technology companies. The things we were doing were about setting up and configuring and training and doing, and everything revolved around technology, which makes all the sense in the world from the perspective of delivering technology. But what if we shift our perspective to the other side? I've set you up for this by how I introduce this. What if the question isn't so much how do we implement technology? What if we see it from the customer's point of view, which is how do I get to results? Because that's actually what they're here to do. Fundamentally, customers who stay are the ones who get results. And so the question is, how do we reorient what we do to around results rather than technology? And how does that help us accelerate? Like, what does that have to do with acceleration? Well, I love this quote from Einstein. When you're courting a nice girl, an hour seems like a second. When you sit on a red hot cinder, a second seems like an hour. That's relativity. What's the point? The point is their perception of the progress is the critical element to not just accelerating, but also reframing the timeline for implementation in a way that's much more engaging and motivating and builds momentum with the customer. So a couple of things. What I found was that what we were doing was something like this. Here's our implementation plan. Here's how long it takes. We've got to get through all of that. And at that point, we can launch. Okay. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on inside there. If you want to know, are there stages? Yes, there's a bunch of stages and, you know, we're working all through it. But from the perspective of the customer, it can look like this, right? So this is something they do in like Disneyland for queues. You know, you might stand it for an hour waiting for a ride, but what they're doing is they're giving you entertainment rewards along the way. Well, we're not here to entertain our clients. We're here to deliver results. So that's a new way to think about this, which is how do we reframe this? How do we break this up into stages that deliver meaningful progress to the customer along the way, a milestone of progress? And progress has to be defined, right? Not as a technological achievement, but as a results achievement or progress to results. So that's, in my opinion, the first and cleanest thing you can do to transform your implementation. So a story about this. I have a client that had a 30-day implementation. It's not a super complex product, but it's enough that it takes 30 days to get everything set up. But what we found was a lot of customers were failing early, like in the first week. And once they sort of dropped off and weren't engaged anymore, their failure and churn rates were extremely high, 90+%. So the question was, why? Why can't they make it to 30 days? 30 days isn't even that long, right? What's going on? If they were serious enough to buy, isn't that, like, don't they have enough commitment to make it through 30 days? And the answer is sort of, but what we frequently see is that they fall off, right? They run into something that gets in the way. Okay, so what do we do with them? Well, what we did was we thought through what's a progress timeline for the customer, not for us. What are the key results moments of achievement for them? And what we realized was that it takes 30 days to get it up and running so that you can run the whole system at scale against your whole business need. But actually, you could get to one achievement, get out your first, in this case, a block of value, the first thing you could do, and in something like 3 days. Now, that doesn't mean the implementation takes 3 days. That means that we could reorganize it so that the customer was able to get very quickly to a first very small little achievement of value. That was a game changer, right? Suddenly all those customers that were failing, and by the way, there are plenty of customers that were not failing. They were doing fine in 30 days. But the ones who were failing early. And so this shift to breaking it into pieces where, you know, can we get that first one out really quickly? Why does it matter? Well, what we found is that customers are very interested in results, but even when we shift our thinking to results, there's another mistake we make. I made it for sure, which is, well, customers will stay when they achieve all the results they expected. that's actually not how they behave. What we see in the data very consistently is that customers are not waiting for all the value to arrive, to see all their results achieved that they had laid out from the beginning. They're actually waiting to see whether it will work at all. And so when you deliver a small piece of value, even that might seem utterly insignificant to you, if nevertheless it's an evidence to the customer that that thing is going to work, what we see is that that's when they say, oh, okay, this is going to work for us, let's double down. And then you get the momentum, then you get the engagement that you want from them that allows you to really leverage that to do more and more difficult things. And so this basic idea is to break up the implementation. Now you say, well, this doesn't imply it's gotten faster at all. And actually that's right. I didn't change the overall length of implementation. This strategy is very specifically about changing the acceleration from the perspective of the customer. Okay, so the process reoriented this way allows vastly more of those failing customers to see some value, to engage, and to double down in a way that allows us to take advantage of that momentum. And remember, that's the issue, right? If we have some customers that are doing fine in 30 days or 90 or 120 or whatever it is, great. We know something about those customers. First, we know they tend to do really well. They don't tend to fail and churn. But the other thing we know about them is that they don't tend to need a lot of help. They're customers that just, you know, bring with them all of the wherewithal to do this really well. But they also represent a fairly small portion of most companies' customer base. In most companies, the majority of customers are not like that. They don't know exactly what they're doing. They don't have a clear plan. So when you break it up into these pieces, you've really put yourself in a position to show them how to succeed step by step. Now, what if this even had the opposite effect? What if it extended the implementation? Well, that would be fine, actually. Our data shows that if they can get to a first result more quickly and see that it's going to work for them, no matter how small that result is, as long as it's measurable, that changes the game and allows us to use that momentum to engage them. And in fact, after that, it becomes less work because, you know, a lot of our work is chasing the customer, et cetera. So once they engage like that, it's really transformative. So here are my 3 suggestions, and I have one overall that I would have you focus on. But you can't do this, first of all, if the customer doesn't have a clear idea of what the result is that they should be looking for. And some of your customers have a good idea of that, but again, we know those customers tend to do well. So really, for most of your customers, you actually have to show them or teach them what that result looks like, right? They have to understand how does this thing materialize in key results that we value, and maybe even in what order. That's first. That shouldn't be hard. That's a slide. It should not. It should not take, you know, a long period of discussion. But it is a shift mentally to think in terms of assuming they have a clarity of what results matter to them. No, shift to here, let's show you how the best customers achieve it. And if you say it that way, they really do engage more and you start to get this momentum building, right? So that's step number 1. There has to be a moment where there is clarity so that later, maybe it's 3 days later or 30 days later, or whatever, when we're able to get to that first result, they recognize it. They knew it was coming. They look at it and say, it's working. Because sometimes you can even show a result to a customer. You probably have had this experience. I certainly have, where they say, okay, so they didn't know that was it. They didn't know to expect that. They didn't recognize it when it arrives as the thing they were hoping for. So you do have to start from the beginning with something around this. But the good news is it's not a big discovery exercise where you ask them what they're trying to achieve and we try to back out of the fact. Actually, the reality is, again, the data on this are very interesting. The majority of customers can't even really answer the question of what exact measurable result they're expecting. That's actually common. It's like 75, 80% of customers can't answer that question. So you can't start with just saying, hey, what are you trying to achieve? Yes, we'll show you that in 30 days. No, you have to show them how it works. You have to teach them, okay? That's the first one. Second one is break it into stages now. So this might involve, it always involves rearranging the steps we might do the technical aspects in, right? How much? And I have a suggestion for that in the next section, but rethinking the sequence of implementation around how do we have the shortest initial path, and that's the third point, to the first measurable result. That's the most important thing. The stages after that, I mean, you should have some if it's long enough. In our case, for the example I talked about, all we had was one more stage. So it was get them to their first measurable result in 3 or 4 days, and then the rest of the time we would just kind of finish the rest of the task. Why? Because that achievement of that initial milestone of value was enough to change the whole momentum, to change the whole posture and body language of the customer, so that they were really much more committed, they were much more engaged. It was easier to get things done after that. But there may be multiple stages, like in my graphic, but that's the most important piece. So this is my recommendation. Focus on how do we build a very quick, as in relation to the time frame. If you have a year implementation, very quick might be 30 days or 60 days. But how do we build the quickest pathway with the least amount of friction for the customer to the first possible measurable result, no matter how small? And that result, by the way, doesn't necessarily need to be the ultimate result they bought the solution for. It could be an intermediate result, but we have to, it won't matter to them, as I said, unless we've shown them that that's a pathway and that this is something they're working toward. So it motivates them to take those first hardest initial actions. They're not hardest technically. They're hardest for them because they're the first. That's when we're starting to say to the customer, you have to change to get good results, which is the reality. So we're making that possible in the shortest period of time that you possibly can. Okay. A couple questions here. Are there any, Asha says, are there any overall results that you can relay that can be measured for a B2B SaaS business this way? Yeah, the critical issue is these are business specific. So when you look at what would you say, the types of results that your product is able to produce, you're going to think about it in terms of the pathway there. There's not like a universal, every SaaS business should use this result as the first one. That's dependent on the business. Sorry, there was another question that popped up there. Did I miss it? Okay. All right. Well, we'll keep going. All right, so that's implementing to results. That reorientation of your approach, I think, has the biggest single impact, and it may not even require you to change what you do in implementation, just the order in which you do it. Of course, it also has to come along with the type of engagement that's able to show the customer their measured value and help them realize they're achieving it, and then leverage that as we go forward. Okay, so that's my first suggestion. Let's move on to the second one. Minimizing customer dependencies. So stepping back, I have an education in economics and in operations, and one of the things that we learn in operations is, you know, that there are lags, there are delays and lags in any process, and you can go analyze the process to see what those lags look like. You can see where the biggest delays are, and you can do this with your implementation. I'm sure many of you do, where you have it staged with key milestones, and you measure what's the average time to get to those milestones and how much variation is there. And that's something that's really quite important to understand, which is that variation is the enemy of efficiency. So even separate from what how long something takes, like a step might take a long time. Even worse than that is how much variability there is. Sometimes some customers this takes an hour. Some customers it takes a month. That's a real problem. And that probably sounds really familiar. That variability is the enemy to doing this well. And so one of the things that I did early on was I started to look at it and say, not just which are the longest, hardest tasks, but where's the most variability? And one of the things that becomes clear when you do this is something you know well, but I had to learn, which is customers are the source of almost all or all of that variability. So if something takes an hour in one case and a month in another case, is the difference because of what we're doing? Very rarely. Most of the time, the difference is the variability in the customer's behavior, how much they engage, how quickly they can get things done, etc. And I'm sure you're absolutely aware of that. There are some customers who can do really well. They just do well. They keep up. They've got the stuff. They're Johnny on the spot. If you ask for something, they get it for you. And we love those experiences. But what do we know? A, those customers don't tend to fail. And B, they're a small portion of our customer base. They rarely make up 50%. Typically it's like 15%. So what do? How do we help those customers that just literally can't keep up? How do we build around that? Well, I have a couple suggestions. First is templatize. What I mean by that? Well, I had a client that had a very long, complex implementation. It was like a 6-month implementation. And, even when we sequence it by result stages, et cetera, there was still way too much fat in the system, way too many places where it just shouldn't take a month, but that's what it takes. And so we went and we looked at, well, what's the customer task there, right? First thing to do, and this won't work for every task, but it will work for some, and it's a surprisingly quick win when you can find it, is to simply say, is it essential to do that task now? So one classic example with this client was they were very early on in the implementation, they were taking their new customers through all the admin panels and all the settings, and they were setting them up, right? Now, for some customers, like big customers, they were very interested in that, and they had very specific settings they wanted to set, et cetera. But what we were finding was that for a lot of customers, they got lost in that. And they didn't even really know, when we step back and look at it, what those settings should be. So templatize or standardize just means, can we give them a setup? In many cases, are there parts we can set up for them and not have to go through it? It takes a lot of time in some cases, and it could be essentially irrelevant to the customer at this stage. Now, we know those settings matter. As they get more advanced, they're going to need to engage with them. Great. Let's push that downstream. At the earliest stage, where failure is the most likely, what we need to do is find every example, every situation where we can remove or obfuscate a required settings or configuration type task. Can we standardize it? Can we tell our customers, hey, there's a bunch of settings here, we'll absolutely go through them. We've set it up right now with the best starting settings, the best default settings, so we can get quickly to setting you up and getting you to value. See, that's a win in many cases. Now, if I have a customer who says, no, I want to stop and do it, of course we will. That's no problem. Typically, the only customers who will do that are the ones who are able to do it well and to understand what you're doing. So for the rest of them, just make it templatized to the degree that you can. This ended up being a quick win over and over again to finding areas where we could cut out fat or wasted time or variability in the system. And that was a big win, at least in the situations I've done in my own company, as well as a number of clients. We found weeks or months in some cases of time that we could compress. So that's my number one. The other two are, if a task is required, is it possible in some cases to push it to a later stage? We kind of talked about this in the last one. Not only will the customer be more likely, deeper engaged, and better able to do it at that point, but it could also give us more lead time, which is my third point. In some cases, I've helped clients figure out if something is essential and we have to have it fairly early on, but it's hard for a lot of customers to do, how early in the process can we push that up, even into the sales process? At an advanced stage in the sales process, there are tons of companies out there who are asking customers for critical things, or to prep their data, or to prep their systems, or to identify the key contact that we're going to need to work with for integration, or whatever else. Even in the sales process, don't hesitate to say, hey, look, we've mapped it out. This one has like a 3-month lead time, and so we need as early as possible to start prepping that customer for it, even before they've decided to close the sale. And I promise you, there are opportunities to do that in some cases. So that's my third one. But the number one in this one, really, where can we just eliminate an unnecessary early piece of customer engagement, friction, and action, so that we can make a shorter path to first value? That's a surprisingly big opportunity, but it does depend on this point that I made. It relies on us understanding that not all customers are the same. We all know we have customers who want and need to go through those settings and set them in a custom way. That's fine. Those customers tend to do fairly well and tend to to not churn. So really we're able to then separate the rest of the customers out and say, but for them, we need to, obscure some of this stuff and put it later when they've developed more maturity, when they're at a higher level of engagement and understanding. So that's my big takeaway for that. And I see a question here from David Jackson. Does teaching the customers the key results start with marketing and sales? Absolutely. By far the best place to establish with a customer what results they've come for is when they're buying it, obviously, or even before that, when they're engaging with the messaging around your product. And absolutely, there are opportunities to kind of push that thinking upstream to the degree possible. But we absolutely need to always, be able to establish that inside the context of implementation so that they can see those progress steps. Okay, great point by Shashi. Due to the variability seen, clear communication is key so each side knows who's the next action owner. Absolutely fabulous point. And I would say, in the context of doing this, making the steps more clear is already a big win, right? Okay, let me go on to my third one so we have time. And I want to leave time for questions later as well. Okay, so what's the next one? The next one is hold customers accountable. Now this one, you may think, gosh, there's a pipe dream. I remember, as I worked through this process years ago in my own company, thinking about the fact that, okay, we can obscure some of it and it makes a big difference, and we can stage it and that makes a big difference, but it doesn't change the fact that there are just some tasks that we are dependent on to get there. The customer will achieve no results if they do nothing. So the idea of I don't know, the fantasy around the customer achieving results without having to change anything significant or painful, it's just not a reality in SaaS B2B, particularly in the enterprise, where we have real implementation complexity. So there's a fact here that we just can't get around, and the fact is that there are big tasks customers have to do. And we need to figure out a way to get them to do them as effectively as we can. One of the things that we see consistently isn't just that customers who get results are the ones who stay the longest, but that the difference between customers who get results and those who don't is the customers who get results are the ones who change how they work to take advantage of the way your solution produces benefits. So the need fundamentally for customers to change is not something that's going to go away. I really don't see that. And as a result, it will continue to be this giant dependency on which our success hangs. So I remember thinking, gosh, if only I could be in a position to literally hold a customer accountable to their change. And it's funny because why would I even frame it that way? Well, because I thought you couldn't. Because in my mind, right, the idea that you could tell a customer what to do and then get on their case when they don't, that just seemed impossible. But where was that coming from? It's coming from that customer satisfaction mindset that's just wrong. If I believe that the fundamental reason customers succeed and stay is because they had a good experience, then I'm going to be very hesitant to think of ways that I can get more leverage and get more aggressively involved in their behavior change. But once I realize, no, that's a secondary goal. The primary goal is for them to get results and as quickly as possible. That, in a way, frees me to think more directly about what can I actually do to drive customer behavior change. And that's when I realized maybe we could hold customers accountable. How to do it? Well, I made a lot of mistakes along the way. I'm going to cut to the chase. How do you hold customers accountable? Well, one of the things is we have to understand most of our customers, this may sound surprising, but I think if you look at your customers, you'll see it's true. We always find the majority of customers don't really know clearly how the things we're asking them to do directly translate to the results they're hoping to get. And as I said, a lot of them don't even know what results those are. So when we teach customers, these are the key results that successful customers get, then we're in a position to do that. The second is, very common problem in implementation is that you get partway in and there's a blocker and there's something wrong, right? They don't have enough licenses and your key contact can't authorize buying licenses, or they don't have the authority to change someone's role or change how someone does something, or to engage another department that they didn't know had to be engaged. Whatever it is, these blockers happen all the time. That's just like standard life, right, in the implementation world. And what we wish is that we could go to the authority in that company and say, hey, can you authorize the new licenses or the change in role or the engagement of this other department? And the problem is that very frequently in implementation, customer leaders have disengaged, right? And we no longer have access to that authority, or it's really hard and slow to get there. So I'm going to talk about the method I've developed for holding customers accountable. And it's remarkably simple, but it relies on something. You'll see exactly what I mean. So you can't hold customers accountable unless they understand how the things you're asking them to do relate to the result they're hoping to get. Do they understand really how essential it is? So a classic example is you might come up with, hey, there are 5 critical key tasks customers have to do to achieve results in the first 30 days or 90 days or whatever it is. And the customer says, yeah. And you get to that time and how many of the 5 got done? Well, 2 of them got done. This is classic. Why? How could that? We told them, but you see, the problem is that there's not this real clarity, and that clarity has to be established in a way that can't be misunderstood and then revisited again and again, because they will forget. And that connection to their results depends on us having established them. So the one thing this really depends on is the thing from the first suggestion, how to implement to results, where you have to establish for everybody's clarity and satisfaction that these are the results that they should expect. And then I'm in a position to connect the things I'm asking them to do. And remember, we've reduced it to the minimum number that are essential to get results, and we've done all that thing, we've sequenced it, etc. But there's still these things. They've still got to do these things. And so we have to have that clarity of what the results are, and we have to tie it to these are the key actions that they need to take. That's number one. The second one is you can't hold someone accountable unless they committed to do something. So you have to be in a position where you say, will you do these things in this time frame? You have to do that. And then you have to put yourself in a position to help them, because a large number of your customers won't know how to do them. So now we've established why. It's to get these results, and these are essential. The second is I'm going to support how you do it. We don't have a lot of time here. One of the most important things I ever developed for my implementation was key action documentation and support and live support for them doing the tasks. We assumed they, had enough based on the thing we sent them or whatever. No, don't ever assume. They don't know how to do it. Assume that they don't know and give them the maximum amount of support in doing those. Because remember, these are the key actions we can't obfuscate or templatize away. These are the ones that their success depends on. And then you're in a position to go back and say, did you get them done? Why not? What can we do to get you back on track? So I'm actually going to give you, I have 2 scripts. And my clients have found these scripts to be incredibly helpful. How to say it, right? How do we actually say it? So here's the first one. How do you commit customers to change? You have to say with clarity, to get these results, it's essential that you make these changes or actions. You have to say that. And you can, by the way. You can. At that stage, it's really easy to make that statement. But again, it relies on you having defined what that result is and them understanding why that's valuable to them. So here's the results the best customers get, and here's what you have to do to achieve those results. Make it as simple as possible. Reduce it to the minimum number of critical steps possible. Then you say, can you get these done in this timeline? Then you commit them. Will you commit to doing them? And you usually do have to give them a timeline, right? If we have an expectation of meaningful results in 6 months, they probably have, 90 days to get these things done, or we won't be on track. Fair enough. So can you get these done in this timeline? And then last but not least, great, let's schedule meeting or meetings now to follow up. This one's really important. You might think of it as just a little housekeeping. No, it's really important. Why? Because it sends the signal. The conversation we just had where I committed you to do this and you said you would, you're going to, at some point in the future, account for that. Just to let them know. Now, it's framed as being helpful, which it is, but it's just to let them know this is actually a serious thing. I'm not just being vague when I ask you to commit to this. This is really going to have to happen. So that's my script. You think, gosh, that's so simple. Could I really like talk that way to customers? Yes. Well, one of the reasons is that early on, you tend to have most of your goodwill remaining. So the sooner you can have this conversation, lay out the results and what they're committing to do, the better. Now, what about the accountability part? That's the part people get the most nervous about. Well, there's a script for that, and it really isn't that hard. But it relies on us being able to show results. We need to look at results. So here's what happens, right? If you measure results, you're going to find that some customers are doing great, and it's cool. You show them the results, and they're like, great, how do we get more? And you show them how to get more, and you're off to the races. But the majority of customers are actually not going to have good results the next time you show it to them. Remember, I promised you, you should show it to them anyway, because even that's better, right, than not measuring. It's so powerful, right? Okay, so here are your results. You're not on track to hit your target. We're not going to get the results. It looks bad. That's okay to say. It's incredibly powerful to say. And you'll notice when you start to show measured results and then connect it to why they're not getting good results, what people think very frequently, they say, oh, they're just going to get so mad. And we're all used to being yelled at by customers. So that's not that outlandish of a worry, right? But it turns out that when you do this, if you've set it up using the commitment script that I just gave you, you know what customers say? Yeah, you're right. We didn't do everything. Okay, you did 2 of the 5 things. What went wrong with those other 3 things, and how can I help you get those on track? Well, we need this thing, but okay, let's game plan around that. Let's set a new timeline. How can I help you? Will you commit to get those done? Yes. Okay, now we're back into the commit. Great, let's schedule a meeting now to make sure that stuff, or meetings along the way, to make sure that stuff gets done. So you see how this works. You can commit and hold customers accountable if you set up your implementation to be about results from the beginning, and then you checkpoint in on those results. Okay, that's the critical thing, and it's amazingly effective. When I first imagined the thought, could I ever hold my customers accountable? It seemed impossible. I promise you, you can do that. It's just that powerful. Now I want to stop. That's the end of my kind of tips and tricks and where I'm going with all this. So I definitely want to do questions. Sri, do you see any that are worth hitting?
Yes, I see a couple of questions. I just added one comment in the chat as well. One additional script question that's worked well for us, especially at that first kickoff meeting when you have the exec sponsor on it, and hopefully you do bring the exec sponsor from the customer side into that kickoff, and you actually ask them, hey, what should we do if your team is falling behind? And typically they're gonna say, hey, you bring it up to me immediately, right? Like, don't wait for too long. I want you to be aggressive. So that sort of sets the tone with the rest of the team. It takes their permission to sort of escalate on them, because you're just opening that question up and saying, hey, what should we do? Any thoughts on that, Greg?
Yeah,
You think
totally. That's absolutely brilliant, and it connects to something I wanted to say, and so now I'll say it, which is, I just said that in a lot of situations, we lose connection, engagement from the sponsor. What happens is implementation starts, they think, okay, great, everything's going, my team's got this, I'll re-engage when we get to launch or when I see results. But how often do they never re-engage? It's just really common. This actually addresses it. So when you ask this question, what should we do if your team is falling behind? What you're really saying to that sponsor is, I'm going to come to you when that happens. You're going to know. So I'm setting the expectation that there's going to be accountability for when things fall behind. So I absolutely love that question. And the other thing I would say about how do you keep sponsors engaged? Well, they have one thing by far and away that's the most interesting thing to them, the thing they can't resist, and it's measured results. If you promise that executive sponsor that there will be key measured results check-ins, they will be very interested in that. They will want to be invited to that. They will want to stay. So the more of those you can have. There was even a situation where we had such a long implementation that I did something weird. What I did was, we had this process where we would build, and at the very end, we'd set up the dashboards and start measuring results. And basically what that meant was we were sending a signal to the executive sponsor. They could wait till the end to re-engage. So what I did was I flipped it. I said, we're going to build the dashboards first and then do the configuration. And my team said, that's insane. Like there will be no data on there until the end. Yeah, I understand that. But here's the thing. What I'm telling my executive sponsor and my other clients is we are all about measuring results. And so the first thing we're going to do is set those up, and we're going to keep checking in until results start arriving. And what I found was the executive sponsor would show up just to see a blank chart, because what I'm doing is I'm showing them that the way we're presenting it to them, this is back to implement to results, not technology. The way we're oriented is around delivering you results. So if you keep checking in with me, every time I'm going to show you results, whether they're there or not. That may sound crazy. I promise you, it's a game changer for the way that particularly executive sponsors think about the process. Very good at keeping engagement. Okay, what else? What other questions we got?
So there are 3 more questions, which have already, okay, I think 4 questions that have been posted under the Q&A. Gonna bring up the first one. Varun, if you can bring up a question from Justin Homsey. Are the results being measured customer dependent or universal? Meaning, would you have the same result metric used for every customer, or do you let the customer define, hey, these are the results that matter for me?
It's a great question. And you might be surprised on the answer, but the answer is universal. And here's why. We have some customers that have thought about this very carefully, and they arrive and they say, look, here's how we're going to measure it. And we look at that measurement and we say, yeah, that's a good measurement. That's valid. That will work. And so we do that. That's what we do. We let them help guide us. But what if a customer comes with one of these other situations? A, they've got a result and it's wrong. It's not what we produce. It's not a good measure of value. Well, we're going to have to correct it. But what's the most common situation? They don't know what the right way to measure results is. So the answer is build your process around standard and allow some of your customers who have the right ideas to modify them. That's perfectly valid. But 80% maybe of your customers have no idea. So what you need is to standardize. Here's why our customers succeed. Here's what the best do. Here's the results they get. Here's how you should think about measurement. Here's how we're going to do it. For most of your customers, that's going to work really well. And then a few customers will say, we also want to do this, or we want to do it differently. Fine. For them, we will. And in those cases, of course, we'll validate that they're the right ones. So hopefully that makes sense. It's mostly about building a consistent, standardized pathway of predefined results that get the best value. And you can think, as you're developing that, you think, well, gosh, all our customers have so many different results they care about. Well, here's the question. If a customer didn't know, what's the one you'd recommend? What's the one you would say, this is the best place to start? Turns out that's going to work for a surprisingly large number of your customers, and get them to the point where someday they may modify it. They may be in a position where they're more mature and they can think about it in a more sophisticated way. But yeah, standardizing is the winning play here.
Perfect. I mean, in our world, we think of some of the customers as a little more visionary customers who are introducing us to, better, new, measurable results that they want. That we can then take that, and if we're able to help them with those, standardize that going forward for other customers as well. So that makes total sense to me. We'll go to the next question, which is from D. Allen. Did you see or find any next level up correct correlation to ROI and retention, or mostly at just the results level, measuring results?
Oh, it's really interesting. It turns out that so we've tested dozens of things. Almost anything you can think of, we've checked to see it doesn't have a correlation with retention. And the answer is actually most things have a correlation, from how big the customer is to where they come from to what their use case is to how they, like, even down to whether they got a discount or which package they bought, whether they expand or contract, whether they have, you name it. Almost everything has a correlation. Now, not all of them are super strong, but there's only one measure we've ever tested that never correlates, and that's customer satisfaction. But the other thing I would say is the results are by far the best overall predictor of long-term retention. But what we found is there's a lot of really good other indicators. And in every case, it appears to be because those are things that either help or get in the way of getting results. Okay, so here's a good example. Customers who have more negative experiences stay more than twice as long as your customers who've only had positive experiences. What's going on there? Well, it turns out that if a customer comes in and tries really hard to use your solution and does all the tasks, they're likely to get good results, but they're also likely to be the customers who run into problems, limitations, confusion, blockages. So it turns out that customers with few negative experiences are also the customers who aren't very engaged. So there's a good example of something that's correlated, right? But what we know is that it has something to do with the results. The other example I'll give is discounts. Why do customers who get higher discounts churn more? Well, it turns out there are two reasons. Customers who insist on a discount are frequently customers who are less engaged and who are going to try not as hard. We're not going to put as much into it. And so it's a predictor of those. But also we found customers who would have bought at the full price but are given a discount, it diminishes their sense of effort and cost that this thing is going to require, and they end up being lazier customers. So a lot of things correlate, but in every case that we have a good, strong correlation, we can see that it has to do with an indicator that customer will or will not get good results in the long run.
I just want to add to that, Greg. A thought which recently came to us was, when it comes to customers asking for discounts, very often that's to bypass putting forward a very strong ROI case to their finance org, which means they are not committing to results that the organization is going to see. They're not building it into their plan saying, hey, we're going to have this efficiency. We don't need to expand the team in this way because we're buying this software. They're just saying, hey, we need this software. It costs only so much, and by not committing to the results, the efficiency, other gains they may see, they're not in it to realize those. They're not going to be held accountable by their leadership to show those results, and hence overall the program could fail.
So right. Great example. Excellent.
You take a couple of more questions. One is from Steve Sanchez, which is, would you have some examples of a low touch or digital motion implementation following these principles?
Yeah. In fact, it can work really well in low touch or digital, because I just said the key is to standardize. Well, one of our kind of instincts is to make everything custom to every customer, be very responsive, to be very helpful. That's very like customer satisfaction mindset. If results are everything, then what I want to do is reverse engineer how customers get results and build a hardened pathway. Step one, step two, this is first teaching them what results there are, what they'll have to do, minimizing. So actually, if you think about all of that, that can be automated in many cases. Now, it can't always be, but that's also why we segment our customers. But the more the customer is at a rudimentary level, the more clearly we can aggressively push a specific pathway that's the minimum friction for them, the maximum results, rewards along the way, the more easy it is to see how you would standardize them. So I have lots of clients where we build an entirely digital motion here. It's an email sequence or in-product sequence where they clearly choose between maybe one of three key results they're hoping to achieve, or maybe it's just one. And then, boom, here's your first task. Here's how long you can do it. It'll only take you 20 minutes. Please get this done. Boom, it's done. Here's your next task. Creating automation around that turns out to be easier when you've set these things in motion, when you've clarified these things. Because again, it's about having a standardized motion, not about being custom for every client. For some clients, but not most clients.
I think one more example that comes to mind for the scaling it from like making it low touch is, two companies come to mind, Drift and Coupa, where the results are shown inside the product. You don't need to go to like a separate dashboard, but pretty much like in Drift, every day you open it, you'll see how many meetings got booked through that software. So the result is getting you an uplift on number of meetings booked. And if it's in your face inside the product without even having to configure a new dashboard, or in terms of what Coupa would do, I think it was like hey, here are your savings, right? Like if you show me the savings up front, that's the result I want. And you've like digitized it. I don't need to wait for a QBR to know what my results are. I can see it every day.
Absolutely. So one thing that I recommend is exactly what you just said. Instead of making someone go all the way to the report engine and click on a report or generate, no, pull out the key result metric and literally show it to them before they get into the software. Make it right in front of their face. It's incredible how much more effective that is at helping them see value and keep that motivation and momentum going.
Right. We have one more question, which is from ASHA. Greg, can you extrapolate this to post-implementation with respect to measuring results in the steady state?
Yeah, I mean, what we know is that the biggest leverage is early on, like in implementation or shortly after, but that the same principle applies indefinitely. You need to find a regular cadence for showing customers their results, measured results. Doing that essentially eliminates the vast majority, 90+% of all churn going forward. And in fact, it's also the key to the other thing we want, which isn't just for them to stay. We want them to expand and do more. When you show them results regularly, it becomes more and more clear to them that the role you play in their lives is to drive results. And they'll start asking, could you help us with this? Do you have a product for that? Or how could your other products help us? That's powerful. I call that customer bonding. Customer bonding is what we see when customers essentially stay forever. And what I mean by customer bonding is when the customer can no longer visualize their future success without you and your product and your company in the equation. That's the most powerful type of customer loyalty is dead. Customer bonding is the future. That's everything. And it's all around creating this expectation that the role you play in their lives isn't to supply them with technology. That's not your role. Your role, your company's role, is to supply them with results and to make them go faster over indefinite period of the future. That's your role. When they see you that way, they change everything about how they approach you, and that's what customer bonding really means.
I have one last question from my side, Greg, before we, conclude the session, which is, what is the role of leadership, either PS implementation or CS leadership, in ensuring keeping the customer accountable? And the team member has certain things they need to do, and you taught a bunch of things for them. But I just want to get your perspective on what the leaders in the call should be looking to do themselves to ensure this happens.
So here's what I found. My people were always doing extremely good work and trying their hardest. Where we always lacked was in my job. The more I looked internally, the more I realized that what we need more than anything, what my people need, is more process, more specific clarity around what they should be doing and what they should be prioritizing. Prioritizing results was a huge change. And it came from leadership to say, hey, look, we want to make our customers happy, but our primary goal is to make them successful. And that's how you should think about everything. That changes the tone of everything. But then it's down to the nitty-gritties. I keep talking about standardizing and hardening your process. The more I provide clear pathway of these are the steps that work, this is how we want to do it, the more my people are able to see their pathway to doing it well. And then they come back with all sorts of ideas on how it could be faster or better, and why don't we do this and that. And it becomes this incredibly innovative environment where people are starting to see that customers stay to get results. Well, then everything we do should be about providing results, and look at all these opportunities. So the thing that I found was, start by saying, instead of thinking of everything as satisfaction and results and value and time and no, we're all about results and we're all about getting there faster. And that just created the environment. But the other thing is, leaders have to build process. You have to create clear pathways for your people to operate, and that's when they excel the best.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Greg. This was a great session. I think we had lots of people join and take notes, and I'll be sharing. I've taken my notes as well. I'll be sharing this along with other notes to anyone interested. Reach out. I see a bunch of you already reached out. sri@rocketlane.com. If you as we said at the beginning, we have some amazing new capabilities we've launched in terms of the customer accountability through like an embeddable customer portal. Anyone who wants a demo, please reach out to us as well for that. And excited to bring more great thought leadership content like this to you all. Thank you so much for your time, Greg, in doing this with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.